Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this Tuesday, April the 23rd. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information in your part of Alaska. You can do that a lot of different ways. Alaska Weather is one of those ways. You can also find this show on YouTube, and if you haven't found that yet, just go to youtube.com and the search bar at the top or on your mobile device's app, type in AKwx TV. All one word together, AKwx TV. That's Alaska Weather TV for short. And you could subscribe to this show via our partners at Alaska Public Media. When you do that, you'll be alerted that the new show is ready to watch. It usually happens a little bit later on in the evening, about 7:30, 8 o'clock or so. And once that's online for you to watch, you can always get the latest information that way. If watching the show over ARCS or KTOO or KUAC services or KYUK out in Southwest, if those services aren't convenient for you at that moment, YouTube can be an alternate backup way to do that. Weather.gov/Alaska also has those links provided for you there, as well as a lot of the maps that we show on the show every single night. And if you can't find any of that stuff, let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov is how I can serve you through email. So please be in touch. Here's the way it looks in the interior tonight. The red colors, of course, a warning. Winter storm warnings in effect from the Yukon Delta, and the Yukon Valley, I should say, all the way down toward the central interior around Tanana, or the middle Tanana Valley, and the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Flats there, all under a winter storm warning until about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, the really big trouble spots tonight are up a little bit higher in elevation. About 1,000 to 2,000 feet is where that snow is really starting to stick. We know it's been snowing down at the lower elevations there, but it's a little bit more of a sloppier, wetter, meltier kind of snow, and that is an official weather term, I should tell you. As you look at the interior, we're talking about especially the Elliott summit or the Elliott Highway along some of the summits, and as you get into parts of the higher terrain there in the upper Tanana Valley, about 1,000 to 2,000 feet, you could end up with about 6 to 12 inches of snow. Many locations, especially north of Fairbanks, those snow totals would be a little bit closer to about 3 to 7 inches of snow. And down below, maybe about 1 to 3 in total. A lot of this is going to be winding up very quickly tonight and into early tomorrow morning. So conditions should improve rapidly, but it's still snowing, and it's mid to late April there. Across the north and west, we're looking at a winter weather advisory, mainly for blowing snow that will reduce visibility down to about a half mile or so. Conditions should start to improve as we get past midnight tonight. And as we're looking at the Alaska breakup map, you'll notice the blue on the map, especially in the southern third of the interior for the upper Yukon. Now, you're talking about some opening of the waters there east of the Alcan, or I should say the upper Tanana Valley. The upper Yukon, there are no big changes just yet. As you look into the Copper River Valley, we're talking about areas that are mostly open, so starting to see some changes there creep their way down the river a little bit. And as you look toward southwestern parts of the Kuskokwim, we're still talking about mostly some open areas there, especially hit and miss in the lower parts of the river. Now, we are going to have an update on Thursday, so make sure you watch on Thursday, and just like we have for the last 2 Thursdays, Crane Johnson from the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center is going to give his breakup update for the center and let us know what's going on with the weather changes and everything we've seen in the last week. This should be a very important message, so make sure you listen in on Thursday for the latest from him. Fire danger has been pretty minimal, generally very, let's say, mediocre levels of high fire danger at this point around the Copper River Basin. So no big changes there for the last couple days thanks to the cool, cloudy, and damp weather. But we are moving toward a weather change, and as you can see on the satellite picture, low pressure is working eastward. The general circulation driving a lot of this right now is sitting across the northern Gulf, and another broad area of low pressure across the southwest coast, but a high is moving in from the western Bering, and as that starts to move everything eastward a little bit, we're really going to start to warm things up and dry things out. It's going to take a little bit of time, but as we get through the rest of the week, we should start to see some pretty significant changes across the interior first, and slowly across south central and the west, and certainly in southeast as well. The overall weather picture right now has really kept a lot of that snow focused across the central and eastern interior, and especially those higher terrain levels. But the north slope has a pretty substantial high pressure system just to the north of Utqiagvik, and that is blowing in that east and northeasterly flow across especially the Chukchi coast. That's keeping the clouds and the blowing snow right in place there across areas north of Point Lay. And that's, of course, where we have the crossed arrows indicating that poor visibility and blowing snow. Low pressure sitting very close to Nome this afternoon, around 1,005 millibars. A little bit of a low pressure wave working into the west coast of Alaska. That's allowing snow to form and blow in there from places like Bethel northward toward Utqiagvik, or I'm sorry, Nome, Unalakleet, and areas around Ammonok is what I'm trying to say. St. Lawrence Island also experiencing a little bit of light snow. High pressure working eastward is already chipping away at the clouds and kind of holding back the Bering Sea fog monster just a bit, but it's also pushing low pressure systems into the Gulf at 1,010 millibars. You can see one area of rain and snow close to the Alaska Peninsula. Across the northern Gulf, 1,007 millibars is all that remains of a weak area of disturbed weather working across the region. A trough of low pressure extends into southeast, and a little bit of light snow hit and miss across the interior of southeast this afternoon. We'll continue to see some breezy conditions, especially around Cross Sound and Stevens Passage and into the Lynn Canal. But right now it mainly looks like small craft advisories will be the rule going forward into tonight and tomorrow. That trough will linger across the northern Gulf for tonight. That should keep the opportunity for some rain and snow showers in the region, and can't rule out an opportunity for a shower, maybe even a thunderstorm, as we're starting to see that weather pattern change as we have cold air aloft, warm air down below, at least warmer than it was before. That should allow some of those bubbles of air to bubble up, and if they do bubble high enough, that turns into a shower fairly quickly, and again, maybe even a thunderstorm. Around Kodiak Island, a 1,008 millibar low will be working across the northern Gulf. This combination of low pressure systems here is still dealing with a lot of cold air coming off the west coast, and as such, there may be some snow showers working across the peninsula with that. The main focus for snow continues to be the central and eastern parts of the interior. With that, we're still going to see accumulating snow through the overnight hours, but by tomorrow morning, a lot of that is shifting off to the east. The focus will be moving away from Alaska, so the snow threat should diminish, and we're going to start bringing in some warmer air. With that, you're going to see a little bit more rain mixing into the weather picture. For South Central, it's mainly going to be a coastal issue as we get into Wednesday. A 1,007 millibar low there is pushing a front toward the north and eastern Gulf Coast. Watch for showers to be hit and miss across southeast. High pressure is really punching into the Bering now and strengthening. 1,027 millibars out there. With that, look for decreasing clouds across southwest. Minimal showers from St. Paul, St. Matthew to St. George, all the way to on Nikolsky and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and the Alaska Peninsula there. Up north, still dealing with some fog in the Beaufort Seacoast, but blowing snow for the northwest. And by Thursday, look at this huge improvement with high pressure moving in, chipping away at a lot of the clouds. Some remaining cloud cover and snow showers in the west and across the southern Bering. Low pressure still in the Gulf, but by and large, this is going to be mainly a coastal issue. So from Sitka, probably up toward Yakutat and around toward Kodiak and Prince William Sound, you're going to have wet and cloudy weather, stuff you're used to, but many in the interior are going to start to see a remarkable shift toward drier, warmer weather. Wednesday morning temperatures in the teens and 20s for the interior, the warmest around Galena, in fact, for the interior and Tanana. As you get up north, the temps in the single digits. Some places around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse might go below zero. 30 for St. Paul and St. George, lower 30s for most of the chain and the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 30s for southeast. Prince William Sound still in the 20s, 28 in Kodiak. High temperatures on Wednesday, back in the 30s and 40s, some of the warmest weather in the upper Kuskokwim.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation weather now. IFR conditions should start the day up across the central and eastern interior, especially around the middle Tanana Valley. North of that, a better chance of running into MVFR from east to west along the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range all the way into Kotzebue Sound and a good chunk of Norton Sound. West of Makoriak and Nunivak Island, you'll get IFR that should just miss St. Paul and St. George, running into the western tip of the Alaska Peninsula, and then widespread VFR conditions across southwest to start your day tomorrow. Watch for hit and miss MVFR across Prince William Sound and into the eastern Alaska Range, and then IFR conditions primarily across the higher terrain of southeast. MVFR through most of the inside passage there, but areas around Clarence Strait may still be dealing with IFR to start the day. That should improve by the afternoon tomorrow. We will see IFR from Prince William Sound all the way down the Kenai Fjords to Kodiak Island and then eastward toward northern parts of southeast. Look for hit and miss MVFR lingering across southeast in the afternoon. Widespread VFR across the Copper River Valley and southwest and Bristol Bay. And that thunderstorm symbol means that convection will be possible, especially across the upper Tanana Valley and into the upper Yukon Valley for tomorrow afternoon. As colder air is moving in aloft, enough heating will be found at the lower levels of the atmosphere that rising air could start to produce some showers and maybe some thunder and lightning. Across the middle Yukon Valley and out toward the west, the Kotzebue Sound region, MVFR should be expected. You'll see the next wave of weather pushing in IFR conditions across Prince William Sound, Shelikof Strait, the Barren Islands, and a large part of southeast for Thursday morning. MVFR conditions for the North Slope and northwest especially, and also areas across the Bering. Still looking at heavy MVFR. As we get into the afternoon, once again, a threat for convection exists across the upper Tanana Valley, and IFR conditions stretch from Prince William Sound to the outer coast of southeast, with MVFR fairly widespread Thursday afternoon and also lingering across parts of the northwest coast, the interior parts of Norton Sound, and a large part of the Bering Sea as usual. Here's your pass conditions in detail then. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions through most of the day. We do think that Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will probably lean over toward VFR as your day goes on, so improvements noted there. Rainy Pass also look to go to VFR by the end of the day. Similar conditions expected in Windy Pass and Isabel Pass. Mentasta Pass looking for VFR later in the afternoon. And again, watching out for some rising air there, and convection will be possible. Tanita Pass looking for VFR to develop throughout the afternoon. Portage Pass probably goes the other way over into IFR conditions there. Marginal to start the day, but again gradually decreasing as we go. And Chilkoot and White Pass also looking to start at IFR with some improvements noted by the afternoon. In the meantime, your freezing levels show that a lot of cold air is still sitting at the surface. The surface freezing line hovering very close to the Pribilofs. It looks like Bristol Bay, and then right over the Alaska Peninsula, over Prince William Sound, and then just about to the capital city and over the higher terrain of the Inside Passage. South of that, you can see the warmer air aloft, but not anywhere close to the mainland or southeast of Alaska. Icing potential is starting to move higher and higher once again. Levels running between about 2,000 to 6,000 feet around the Yukon Valley and northward, around 3,000 feet and higher for the Yukon coast and Norton Sound, about 4,000 to 5,000 feet around South Central, Kodiak Island and out toward Sand Point, and about 4,000 to 5,000 feet for the central and eastern Gulf and into southern parts of southeast. Now this is for a generally isolated moderate potential throughout the day. The jet stream is pretty wavy gravy. It looks like we've got a really strong trough here out across the west, but we also have a lot of leftovers from the current area of low pressure sitting across south central. So wind speeds right now drawing in that continental flow into the west and starting to warm things up slowly, but it's still getting a healthy dose of colder air flowing in from the Bering Sea, 50 to 85 knots there. The main jet still south and still pretty upset, anywhere from 100 to 110 knots for most areas south of Alaska. So we still have low pressure sitting across the interior, one wave across the Alcan, another across the southwestern Capes. Northerlies moving out of the Bering Strait, a south and westerly flow over the Gulf, anywhere from 20 to 40 knots coming into southeastern Alaska, and a north and easterly flow over the North Slope, 15 to 20 knots there with high pressure building out across the west. Keep your eye on that for the next several days. High pressure sitting across the west at 3,000 feet, pulling in some of that drier air, anywhere from 10 to 15 knots there in the west. Low pressure south of Kodiak, not terribly strong, a southwest flow at 30 knots coming into southeast, and an easterly flow fairly broad across the interior, anywhere from 10 to about 30 knots all the way to the North Slope. Most areas in south central seeing light winds, most on the west coast looking at light offshore winds and a stronger wind on the North Slope, 20 to 30 there. Turbulence in, we're mainly going to watch areas up north, looking for at least a little bit of chop below 5,000 feet. Your better chance of some thumps and bumps across the eastern Brooks Range, and a little bit of chop across the northern and eastern Gulf Coast below about 4,000 feet. A little bit of convection in the eastern Alaska Range.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen, and actually collapse, we're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles and nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. And the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and they'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And onto your sea ice now. You'll notice that higher concentrations of ice are still found across western parts of Norton Sound, north of St. Lawrence Island, and also south of St. Lawrence Island. And we continue to see continued coverage of that across the Kotzebue Sound region and Chukchi Coast. However, a lot of the concentrations are fairly broad here and high. 80% or higher is what you see with the white colors there. But the thickness is not that great, and all that is because this is generally new ice south of the Bering Sea coast, or the Bering Strait, I should say. In the coming days, as much stronger, warmer systems moving into the western Bering, a lot of this will change once again. You can look at the latest information, including the sea ice outlook, at weather.gov/anchorage/ice. Around southeast, look for some gusty conditions. Small craft advisories will continue in many locations as we go into Wednesday, but we're not talking about gales or storm force winds or anything like that at Wednesday or Thursday. Look for southerlies, 15 knots, 3 to 6 foot seas on the inside. Southerlies coming up the outer coast, anywhere from 15 to 20 knots. You're looking at about 10 foot seas there. A little bit of a stronger east and southeasterly flow once you move west of Yakutat, 30 to 35 knots with a 10 foot sea on Wednesday. That comes up just a little bit more to 11 foot seas as you get into Thursday afternoon. South and southeasterlies south of Sitka, 15 to 20 knots, and 8 foot seas expected there. And on the inside, winds actually come down a bit. South and southeasterly flow generally, northerlies in the Lynn Canal, and 2 foot seas on the inside. For Wednesday, easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 20 knots, 30 knots outside, 3 to 9 foot seas on either side, and east and northeasterlies coming into the Kenai Fjords and over the Barren Islands, 25 to 30 knots. East and northerly winds coming down Cook Inlet, 15 to 25, 3 to 6 foot seas there on Wednesday, and by Thursday, not a whole lot of change. A north and easterly flow continues. Low pressure sitting here across the central and eastern Gulf, and 15 to 25 knots should do the trick in just about all areas. 4 to 5 foot seas on the inside of Cook Inlet, 3 foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, and 7 to 9 foot seas across the north and western Gulf. For Bristol Bay, northeasterlies, 20 knots, 4 foot seas there. Slightly higher seas as you move down the coast. A northwesterly flow coming off of AKwx, Perryville, Sand Point, anywhere from 25 to 30 knots, and 8 to 11 foot seas expected. Northeasterlies going strong inside of Shelikof Strait, southwesterlies on the other side of Kodiak Island. There's a low pressure system sitting right about here for a good part of your Wednesday there, so keep that in mind. 9 to 10 foot seas on either side. Winds will calm and diminish as we get into Thursday for Bristol Bay. Look for northerlies down toward Cold Bay, 15 knots on 4-foot seas. Northwesterlies crossing over Kodiak Island, about 20 knots or so, and 5 to 7-foot seas from Shelikof Strait and southward down the Pacific coast and east into the Gulf of Alaska. For the Aleutians, winds will be generally slower and waves will be generally lower. All because of high pressure sitting here out across the western Bering Sea. You'll take it, won't you? North and northwesterlies around the central and eastern chain, 15 to 20. You're looking at about 5 to 6-foot seas in general, 7-foot seas west of Kiska to Shemya, and north and northwesterlies from Nikolsky to Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, 7 to 8-foot seas there. You'll get a little bit more of an east and southeasterly flow starting to turn in a little bit here. You can see the winds picking up out in the west, 15 to as high as 35 knots. A sharp difference there between Kiska and Shemya as that stronger return flow comes into the backside of high pressure way out to the north and west of you. The center of high pressure, though, is moving across the Bering, so plan on that, follow that, enjoy that while you can. That east and northeasterly flow brings you smaller seas, 4 to 6-foot seas in most areas for Thursday. For Wednesday, generally light and variable winds, again, as high pressures are working eastward. Kind of a variable flow here around Norton Sound, south of St. Lawrence Island, towards St. Paul, St. George, Nunivak Island, 10 to 15 knots, 4 to 5-foot seas in the area. And again, the variable flow on Thursday. Winds come up a little bit more south of Etolan Strait into the Kuskokwim Delta, 15 knots, 3-foot seas there. Everywhere else, about 2 to 3-foot seas. And again, light winds across Norton Sound. For the North Slope, stronger winds, easterlies, 25 knots over the Beaufort. Offshore winds anywhere from 10 to 30 knots there. So again, blowing snow will be an issue there north of Point Hope to Point Lay. And as we get into Thursday, winds diminish a little bit more around the Chukchi in the vicinity of high pressure. And the Beaufort Seacoast still going strong. Easterlies, 20 knots over the ice for your Thursday. Let's recap tonight's weather. Low pressure still going strong across the interior for places around Fairbanks. A couple inches of snow may be possible on top of what you've already seen. But for the higher terrain, a much better chance that you're going to accumulate on top of what you've already seen into the overnight hours. Winter storm warnings are in effect for you. If you're above 1,000 to 2,000 feet, chances are you could get anywhere from 3 to 7 inches closer to Fairbanks to about 6 to 12 inches of snow across some of the higher terrain in the 40-mile country. Low pressure is moving out of Bristol Bay and into the Gulf as we go into Wednesday and Thursday. That'll keep high pressure on the move in the east and make room for a new high to break through some of the clouds in south and western Alaska. Have a good night.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.